Next, we will have item number 2016-102, High Speed Rail Authority. Senator Vodak, we invite you to the table. Any of your witnesses? And also, while we're doing this, why don't we ask the affected agency to join the table as well? So the affected agency, we are dealing with item number 2016-102, dealing with High Speed Rail Authority. Great. Senator Vodak, welcome, and when you're ready to proceed, feel free.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members, the LA Times recently exposed a 2013 report by Parsons Brinckerhoff that estimated that the cost of the building of the first phase of high-speed rail had risen 31% to $40 billion. Scientists, engineers, and tunneling experts all confirmed that high-speed rail will be behind schedule and over budget. The existence of the Parsons Brinckerhoff report and the fact that the authority hid it for 2 years does not speak well for the authority or the estimates it has provided to the legislature and the public. I'd like to thank Speaker Atkins for putting pressure on the authority to release the report, or we have never seen it. We all know the issues here. You all have seen the media reports, and last year we had an extensive hearing on the authority. I appreciate the committee's consideration for this matter, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Auditor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. As Senator Vodak indicated, this would be an audit of the High Speed Rail Authority, really specifically looking at project costs and how they develop those costs and then share that information both with the legislature and with the public at large. The first objective is related to the authority's policies and procedures for developing project information, costs, what the funding sources would be, the timelines that they put together. They typically put together a biennial business plan, so we would be looking at that, and then any updates in between those biennial plans. Looking at the most recent plan, reviewing it for accuracy and completeness as far as the project costs that were included in their biennial business plan that they produced in February of 2014. Also, as Senator Vodak indicated, looking at some subsequent update reports that came out subsequent to the biennial plan, and then the plan that they intend to publish this year, their next biennial plan. In addition, the Senator is asking us to look at procedures that the authority's board members, how does the authority share this information with the board members? Are the board members kept apprised of current cost estimates related to the project? And what processes are in place, as I mentioned, for disclosing this information to the legislature as well as the public? And then testing whether or not they're following some of those protocols for disclosing updated cost information and any updates that the project management consultant comes up with as well, so either internally or with their consultants that they use to assist them with this. And then the last objective is, to the extent possible, how much is the project estimated to cost using the most recent reports? What is the actual estimated cost, and what supporting documentation does the authority have to support those costs? Relatively small, 2,100-hour audit, take us about 5 months.
Thank you very much, Madam Auditor. Members, questions and answers. Oh, excuse me. We'll have the affected agency to give your comments and your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Morales with the High Speed Rail Authority. First, let me say, should the committee decide to move ahead, I want to assure you we'll cooperate fully with the audit should it proceed. As a general point, I want to note that our team has been very forthright about the cost of this program. We laid out, in fact, a $98 billion price tag, have worked to bring it back down to $68 billion and continue to bring that cost down. So I think any notion that we have been anything less than transparent about cost estimates, I think, just isn't a well-founded suggestion. When you're talking about estimating cost of a 500-mile-plus system built over a number of years, there are any number of assumptions and inputs that have to go into that estimate. Lots of assumptions about inflation rates, not just today, but 5-10 years out, cost of construction, and then, of course, what the system elements are. How many miles of tunnels will there be as opposed to how many miles of viaduct and at grade, things like that. So there are lots of assumptions that have to go into this. When the article in question came out, we did respond quickly and provided information to the legislature, including the report that was noted. And the committee has a copy of that, and that was provided to the legislature as a whole back in November, and we've provided it to the committee again today. What was described in the newspaper article as a confidential report was in fact a draft PowerPoint early in the process, looking at some options of how the cost estimate might be developed. It was early in the process. It laid out some options, one of which was to extend a segment of the system by 16 miles. That accounted for more than half of the cost, and that's not a cost increase, it's a movement from one segment to another. We decided against making that change, and so the cost change didn't come into play. The other remaining issues affecting cost were all assumptions about elements such as, again, miles of tunnels and things like that. And through the course of deliberation, those changes were not ultimately accepted. In response to the information we provided to the Speaker back in November, there is a hearing now scheduled on January 27th with the Budget Subcommittee that will look into this issue. Lastly, I do want to just point generally on the whole question of cost estimation. A few years ago, the Federal Government Accountability Office, the GAO, spent almost a year looking into a number of our processes, including our estimation processes. They came to the conclusion that we were doing it all in accordance with standard practice, made no recommendations for changes. The peer review group, which is an independent entity reporting to the legislature, has also looked at our estimates, come to similar conclusions. And so I just want to assure you we're using standard procedures and are transparent, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for Member Jones?
Please. It seems like the subject of tunnels has come up several times in discussions regarding the high-speed rail. Do you know how many miles of tunnels are going to need to be built?
Not yet. We are still in the process of determining the alignments where tunnels will mostly come into play, and there are a few parts of the state where we know we will have tunnels. But the exact alignments, which will determine exactly where those tunnels are, how long they are, how deep they are, and all that has yet to be decided.
I served on the Transportation Budget Subcommittee in my first term, which was 4 years ago, and we got that answer quite a bit then, too. Did the original initiative that the voters of California approved, I think in 2008, give a deadline for route alignment and when the high-speed rail was supposed to have all of this proposed?
No, it did not.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, some questions for Mr. Morales. I have the letter that you had, the authority had prepared in response to the LA Times article. You've reiterated some of the points. What I see in the letter and hear from your testimony is not that there's anything in the LA Times article that was suspicious, unfounded, totally wrong, but that things are in movement, tunneling can cost a lot, and we have a comfort level with what our cost estimates are. That's, and in fact says our technical consultants reiterate their comfort level with it. I have more of a comment, I suppose, than a question. I represent a Bay Area community. And the #1 project Bay Area folks have in their minds is what's the greatest example of comfort in cost estimates from consultants is the Bay Bridge, which was wildly over estimates, wildly over time, but all throughout the process we had a lot of affirmation that things are going not perfect, but there's a lot of things that could change and otherwise. So I don't see anywhere in the letter or here in your testimony anything that takes the LA Times article, which is, you know, it's a newspaper, it's not necessarily what should guide us all, and that there's anything really suspicious or wrong or untoward in it that we should be cautious about in considering whether to vote for this audit.
Well, I think the article, the basic facts were there. How those facts were used to then draw conclusions and present statements, we did absolutely take issue with, because the clear impression created in the article was that there was an overall price increase of some 31%, which is absolutely not the case. And that was because of a misreading of that information by the reporter. And so we do take issue with that, certainly.
Okay, because I do, and I respect that. I see a lot of comfort that how things are going, and we feel good about our estimates as the response, and less of a more point by point. The one exception was with respect to construction costs. You just mentioned that the first 3 construction packages are under budget, but that's just those first 3. That is a very finite example that you have. The reason I'm making this point is I really thank Mr. Vidak for bringing this forward, and I think the auditor is exactly the entity that we should have look into this and look into costs, regardless of where members are on the issue of high-speed rail. Every vote I've had on high-speed rail up here has been strictly party line, and we've had a spotlight shown by this article on what could be another major Bay Bridge fiasco. It may not be, but certainly it's not, what I'm hearing from you is it's not completely unfounded that there could be some issues. And I'd just like to urge my colleagues to support this audit regardless of your position on high-speed rail, because it has been so partisan. We have a nonpartisan independent state auditor who has the ability to do this audit, looks like in a reasonable amount of time, much less costly than the ones we've just voted for, one of which was kind of highlighted by another LA Times article. And I hope we can see a bipartisan vote in support of this audit, and I would look forward to the information to take the partisan conversations out and get some facts from an independent source. So thank you, Senator Vidak, for bringing this, and I look forward to more information.
Senator Roth.
Well, among my concerns, I certainly have concerns about the cost of this project, but I guess my question goes to the State Auditor. Madam Auditor, in reading the audit scope and objectives, number 6, determine how much the project is estimated to cost, et cetera, et cetera. Are you staffed to do an analysis of construction costs and come up with a project cost for this thing? And if so, will we actually get a figure in your audit report?
The way the objective reads is looking at recent reports that the authority put out and certainly looking at supporting documentation. So we would rely on some of the information from the authority, but what our office often does in a situation where we don't have the expertise in-house, and I think that's where your question is going, we would hire expertise. We're currently doing that on an audit that was approved last year. We've hired a GIS expert to assist us in doing some demographic work. So anytime we have an audit where we have an objective such as this one, we would contract and bring in that type of expertise to be able to be the expert who can look at the reports and say, well, this is a reasonable estimate or this is a reasonable approach for developing the estimate. That's what we would do to answer that particular objective.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Galgiani.
So there will be a hearing on January 27th by the Assembly Budget Committee, correct? The Subcommittee on Resources and Transportation. There will be a special hearing on that date, correct?
That's
to review this information. Also, perhaps the director can speak to when is the next pre-appropriation process and when is the next pre-expenditure process, because those are two processes that were built into the High-Speed Rail Bond Act that no other infrastructure project in the state of California has to follow. So any of the Caltrans projects that are ever done, they never have to follow any kind of a pre-appropriation process or pre-expenditure process. So perhaps you can talk to us about that, because I'd like to see the scope of what all of the different analyses are and the timing for each. And is this duplicative or is this really an appropriate time?
A next step that would be crucial in this is we actually have under statute, have to produce a business plan and provide it to the legislature every 2 years. The draft of that plan will be out in February, and that will have, of this year.
Of this year.
That will have updated cost estimates along with all updated information on ridership and everything else. So within roughly a month or so from today, the legislature, the public will have a look at what the new estimates are, what all of the assumptions are going into them, and what the final figures are.
And is the authority asking for any appropriation in this year's budget?
At this point, we are not, no.
Okay. And is there any pre-expenditure process this year that must be undertaken?
Not at this point. The board's not decided to move forward with those yet. But certainly at the time that they do, that triggers then reviews by the legislature through the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, as well as the Director of Finance.
So that could be even later this year?
Correct.
That could be triggered, and then it would require the legislature to go through that process before you can actually spend any of the monies?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Bell?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for not being here. I was in the Government Finance Committee. The pro tem of the Senate has requested that the Senate policy committees place a priority on oversight. And to that end, the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee is planning a spring oversight hearing on the High-Speed Rail Authority, which will be more comprehensive than this request. So we'll actually get into much more detail about these issues. We anticipate reviewing the High-Speed Rail Authority's updated business plan, which we expect pretty soon. It's going to be a new business plan, so they're going to present that, as well as the work completed to date. And we invite Senator Videk to join us as our guest at the committee. The members, I'm sure, Senator Roth and others, Senator Galgiani would be happy to invite Senator Videk to attend. We would also invite our colleagues in the Assembly to attend as well. Mr. Chairman, be happy to have members that are interested. Therefore, I request this audit not be approved, and it's unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our public comments is due right now, but I want to establish a quorum while we have a quorum. So, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Assemblymember Gibson.
Here.
Gibson present. Asajan. Baker.
Here.
Baker present. Campos. Jones. Here. Jones present. Nazarian. Yes. Nazarian present. Wood. Senator Roth.
Here.
Roth present. Bell.
Here.
Bell present. Cannella. Fuller.
Here.
Fuller present. Galgiani.
Here.
Galgiani present. Lara. And Leyva.
We have a quorum established. Now we will have an opportunity.
Mr. Chair, could I just make one comment, because I think there might be a misimpression among the committee that I just want to correct, if you could indulge me for just a moment. No, let me just go. I'm going to public comment right now. We have public comments being taken. Okay. 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, it won't take that long. Thank you very much. David Wolf here with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Catch my breath here. We're in support of this audit. And simply put, listen, there's a $9 billion discrepancy between the Parson-Brinkerhoff estimate and that which was provided to the legislature. And that's almost as much as the existing Prop 1A bond. And catch my breath here. Out of shape.
Well, I think he's catching his breath after having testified in favor of my bill. And he actually did testify.
Yeah.
Thank you, David, for that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bell. No, and it's a good bill. And Howard Jarvis does support good policies that benefit taxpayers, so I want to make that point as well. And we support this audit because it benefits taxpayers as well. So again, the $9 billion discrepancy between the Parsons-Brinkerhoff estimate and that which was provided to the legislature is almost as much, again, as the existing Prop 1A bond. And with ridership estimates continually being revised downward and the expenditures for the project increasing, and especially regarding the prospect of having to tunnel through the Tehachapi's and all the costs that it's going to be associated with that, increased oversight of this program in the high-speed rail authority, we believe, is abundantly needed. And it's especially true given that private and federal funding has yet to materialize. So for all those reasons, we do support the audit.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, members, Cesar Diaz on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. I want to thank this committee for a very thorough analysis of this audit request and some of the things that were actually said from the dais. This is one of the most accountable and sort of oversight-filled projects that you can see. I think the legislative body, with Senator Galgiani and others here, Senator Bell, has a tremendous job in looking at this project from all aspects, from the type of people that they're hiring, the contracts, the timelines of the projects, and the different types of avenues that they have for alignment in different routes. We believe the authority has done a fantastic job in meeting all the public requests for information. You see the information that is presented to Senator Vidak. All they have to do is ask. I think this is an unnecessary use of taxpayer dollars. These resources are scarce. We can use them for other more important and pressing needs. The information that Senator Vidak is requesting, I think, could be just have established with a meeting with Mr. Morales and other members of the authority, and that information will be thoroughly provided. And I think it will also be provided to the legislature in the upcoming legislative sessions. For those reasons, we ask you to oppose this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Robinson on behalf of Caltrain. We're an extension of the high-speed rail project in the Bay Area between San Jose and San Francisco as part of the authority's blended system. I agree with many of the statements that were said by Mr. Diaz. There's a lot of oversight on this project. There are peer review groups out there. There are a number of reports that are due to you guys every year, as a matter of fact, that are typically not required by other state agencies. In terms of the cost projections, I don't think it's anything strange. I'd encourage all of you to go look at the 2012 business plan, which actually identifies a range of costs, many of them above the $68.5 billion number that we've come to rely on. And then finally, I'd echo what Mr. Morales said. So far, what we know is that the estimates for the program, that those contracts that have been let are actually coming in significantly under what the engineers' estimates that made up that $68.5 billion number. So with that, I'd ask you to oppose the audit and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Michael Young, California Labor Federation. We'd also like to align our comments with that of Senator Chavez and the building trades. We think that this project has a decent amount of significant oversight already. We feel that this audit is duplicative and redundant, and we ask that you oppose this measure as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, we would like to invite Senator Vidak for any closing comments that you may have.
Well, I appreciate the time. Just wanted to reiterate that this is the largest project in the country. The cost is for the audit is a small number for something that will eventually be audited, whether it's this year or next year when folks really demand it. This is going to be audited, and I think we should do it today. It's not against high-speed rail. It's just making sure that the taxpayers' money is being spent wisely. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We will vote on this item right now.
I'd like to make a comment, please.
Oh.
I'm not going to be supporting the audit today, and it's not that I don't want the project audited. I actually built a number of audits into the whole process, one being the pre-appropriation process. So before they ever ask for any money, they have to go through an entire audit, if you will, about how the money will be spent. It has to be compared to the business plan, which, as the director pointed out, will be coming out later next month. That will be another look at the entire breadth of the project, and will give detailed information for the public, the press, the legislature, and everybody to critique, and will give us a full look so that we can have our legislative hearing that the pro tem plans to have. That was the reason for the business plan, is so that we were having transparency on every single level. No project in any of the water bonds that we've ever passed or any transportation projects have that level of oversight. Secondly, before any money is ever spent, there is an entire pre-expenditure process that, again, is essentially an audit, where the budget committees in both houses look at what they're planning to spend the money on, and has anything changed from the time that they asked for the money to the time that they're going to actually spend the money. So they have to go through that entire process. I envision the actual audit from the auditor to be of monies after they're spent and something is done, because that's the only level at which we don't already have oversight. So I am not supporting this today because I believe it should follow the pathway of the pre-appropriation process, the pre-expenditure process, the business plan. After the money is spent, there should be audits on what was expended and did that comply with what the authority told us during the pre-expenditure process.
Thank you very much. We will, Senator Fuller.
I just have one comment. Senator Simitian, Senator Lowenthal, and I were on Subcommittee 2 for 3 years, and we asked for the business plan to be updated. You can go back to the record and look. It was never submitted and updated to our satisfaction. We never felt we got the figures that we needed, and so I'm here today showing up at this particular moment just because I need to say that in my mind, the public deserves this audit. And if everything is fine, a small amount of money we spent on it. If everything is not fine, then when you have your hearing later this month, you'll have lots to talk about as facts start coming out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the vote. We're dealing with, again, for the record, item 2016-102, High Speed Rail Authority. We had a motion. I didn't hear a second. The chair's recommend. We have a second. The chair is recommending a no vote on this. Secretary, please call the roll.
Motion to approve audit request 2016-102. Assemblymember Gibson?
No.
Gibson, no. Asajan? Baker?
Aye.
Baker, aye. Campos?
No.
Campos, no. Jones?
Aye.
Jones, aye. Nazarian? Nazarian not voting. Wood?
No.
Wood, no.
No.
Wood's not here. He's over in the Senate.
Nazarian, no. Correction. And Assemblymember Wood? Wood, not present.
He's over next door. Government Finance.
Senator Roth?
Not voting.
Roth, not voting. Senator Bell?
No.
Cannella? Cannella? Fuller? Yes. Fuller, aye. Galgiani? Galgiani, no. Lara? And Leyva?
That item will not be considered. I'm sorry? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, are you moving the roll open?
Yeah, we'll hold the roll open. Yes, thank you very much.